Good morning, guys. Welcome to your Bitcoin show. Listen, really glad to have you guys here. Now, I'm taking a closer look at something this morning, and I'm going to show you what it is. It's this Bitcoin time traveler, so-called Bitcoin time traveler. I've been examining some of his stuff here, I don't believe for a minute that he's really a Bitcoin time traveler. But what I find interesting is how he looked into the future and kind of saw where Bitcoin price was going almost exactly. To me, it almost seems like a number of things he's written down here go beyond chance. I think he might be some sort of an insider. I've laid out programs before how I believe that Bitcoin was not created by Satoshi Nakamoto, but created by probably working groups within the clandestine parts of the government. And this guy might be an insider. He might have information that is not available to us, but he might have released it in the form of this fiction, which is, I'm a time traveler. Okay, that's just a fiction. But his information might be generally correct because they have supercomputers and stuff. They have access. These insiders within the clandestine parts of the government have things like computers that are 100 years ahead of anything that we have, and they can run scenarios and stuff within these computers, and they can pretty much tell by running scenarios. It's the same way. Listen, it's the same way that they're able to tell you where a hurricane's going to hit. They do what's called computer modeling. And the computer gives them the general course of the hurricane. It's not dead on correct. I mean, if a hurricane's 5 days away, they can tell you within about a 50-mile area of shoreline where it's going to hit by using these computer modeling. Right? Well, they can do this same computer modeling on these big, powerful computers, and they can tell you what Bitcoin price analysis is going to be into the future. This guy might have had that information from these computers. And he might have been using this whole thing about time travel as a way of getting the information out there clandestinely as part of these operations that they're doing. I mean, they're constantly doing cloak and dagger operations behind the scenes that we don't know anything about. Okay, so I'm going to read this to you guys because it is very interesting. He says, I am sending this message from the year 2025. The time traveler thing again, Okay, things are looking bleak here. Some of you will carry blood on your hands. Please move on if you don't believe me. I have no way of proving what I am going to tell you. I don't want to waste your time, so I'm merely going to explain what happened and its consequences. The Bitcoin value has increased by about a factor of 10 on an average from the year 2013. Now, he's writing this in the year 2013. So his first three predictions here, he could have got them out of a textbook, of where Bitcoin was. In 2010, he knew where that was. In 2011, he knew where the price was then because he's writing from the year 2013. And he knew it was $10 in 2012. And he knew it was $100 in 2013. So those predictions are pretty much, he could have had those out of any book, right? But then he starts to move on into the future from where he is. And he says, from then on, a slight slowdown as the value increased by a factor of 10 every 2 years. So he's saying $1,000 in 2015. Well, if he was using computer modeling from some of the biggest, most powerful computers on Earth that he might have had access to, he could have given him these figures, and these figures are pretty darn close. $1,000 in 2015, $10,000 in 2017. This is the one that gets me. $100,000 in 2019. Well, he's pretty much spot on for 2017, but you know how quick Bitcoin can rise up once it starts to get some momentum behind it? He's predicting 100,000 in 2019. We'll have to wait and see how close he is because 2019 hasn't completely played out yet. He's predicting $1 million in 2021, so only 2 years later. And this is what gets me. he's predicting that from there onwards, there is no good way of expressing its value in dollars, as the dollar is no longer used. So he's saying from the year 2021 forward, the dollar's no longer used, nor is there any central bank issued currency for that matter. From the year 2021 forwards. So he's supposedly saying he's in the year 2025. Okay? He says there are two main forms of wealth in today's world in 2025 he's talking about. Land and cryptocurrencies. He says just over 19 million bitcoins are known to be used in the world today. A few 100,000 were permanently lost, and we have a population of just over 7 billion people. On average, this means the average person owns just under 0.003 bitcoins. However, due to the unequal distribution of wealth in my world, well, we share that same uneven distribution of wealth in the world of today, you know. This means the average person owns less than 0.001. That's right, most of you reading this today are rich if you didn't lose your wallets. I live near an annoying young man who checked his old wallet account 2 years ago and discovered that he received a tip of 0.01 Bitcoin back in 2013 for calling somebody a bleep. When he was a 16-year-old boy, evidently, he received this tip. Upon making this discovery, he bought an airline ticket, left his house without telling anyone, and escaped to a citadel. What is a citadel? You might wonder. Well, by the time Bitcoin reaches $1 million, services began to emerge for the Bitcoin rich to protect themselves as well as their wealth. It started with expensive safes, then began to include bodyguards, and today earlies are termed for early adopters, as well as those rich whose wealth survived the transition live in isolated gated cities called citadels, where most work is automated. Most such citadels are born out of the fortification used to protect places where Bitcoin mining machines were located. The company known as ASIC Miner is known here as a city where Mr. Friedman rules as king. You see, now, I don't believe he's a Bitcoin time traveler, but I believe that he's making some of this stuff up from his time, kind of trying to fill in the gaps in his story. I think the main part of his story is the Bitcoin pricing. And if he's an insider, he could have got that Bitcoin pricing from computer modeling on huge computers the government uses. In my world, soon to be your world, most governments no longer exist, as Bitcoin transactions are done anonymously, and thus governments can't enforce taxation on their citizens. Exchange of services are nearly all online, totally decentralized, and anonymous. Most of the success of Bitcoin is due to the fact that Bitcoin turned out to be an effective method to hide your wealth from government, whereas people entering rogue states like Luxembourg, Monaco, and Liechtenstein were followed by unmanned drones to ensure that the government knows who is hiding wealth. No such option was available to stop people from hiding their money in the blockchain. Governments tried to stay relevant by buying Bitcoins. This made the problem worse, and it increased the value of Bitcoin even further. Governments did so in secret, of course, but the Generation Snowdens have become greedy government employees who transferred Bitcoin to their own private wallet and escaped to archaic places where no questions are asked as long as you can cough up some crypto. The four institutions with the largest still accessible Bitcoin balances are believed to be as follows. And he's saying ASIC Miner, 50,000. The IMF, 70,000. Government of Saudi Arabia, 110,000. And North Korean government of 180,000. Economic growth today is about negative 2% per year. In other words, the world is shrinking. He says, why is this? He says, if you own more than 0.01 Bitcoins, chances are you don't do anything with your money. There's no inflation, and thus no incentive to invest your money. Just like the medieval ages had no significant economic growth as wealth was measured in gold, our society has no economic growth either, as people know that their 0.01 Bitcoin will be enough to last them a lifetime. The fact that there are still New Bitcoin releases is what prevents our world from collapsing so far, it seems. But people fear that the decline in inflation that will occur during the next block halving may further wreck our economy. What happened to the Winklevoss twins? You know, and he says about how they had problems. He says, after seeing the enormous damage done to our society, terrorist movements emerged that sought to hunt down people known to have large balances of Bitcoin or believed to be responsible in any way for the development of cryptocurrency. Ironically, these movements use Bitcoin to anonymously fund their operation. Most people who own any significant amount of Bitcoin no longer speak to their families and lost their friends because they had to change their identities. There have also been a few suicides of people who have not handled the guilt after seeing what happened to the bag holders. The type of skeptical people who continued to believe it would eventually collapse, even after hearing the rumors of government buying Bitcoin. So he says there's a type of skeptical people, he says here, who continue to believe it would eventually collapse. I guess they believe it's going to collapse. The higher it goes, they keep thinking it's going to collapse. All the way up, I guess, to $1 million and beyond. They're probably still saying it's in a bubble when it's at $1 million, you know, and it's going to collapse, you know. And it says, even after hearing the rumors of governments buying Bitcoins, they still believe it's going to collapse. Many people were, okay, I'm not going to bother reading this part right here. Why didn't we abandon Bitcoin and move to another system, he says. We tried, of course. We tried to step over to an inflationary cryptocurrency, but nobody with an IQ above 70 was willing to step up first and volunteer. In other words, your money's going to lose money and nobody wants it. I remember when I was first mining Bitcoin, they did have a cryptocurrency that you'd mine it, put it in your wallet, and then it would take some out as inflation. And it didn't fly, you know. I think I still got a wallet here someplace with few of those coins I mined, you know, years ago. I can't remember the name of the coin. But anyway, if I opened that wallet right now, I'd see the coins fly out. You know, it would disappear all in inflation. Probably because I've held it that long, it would all be gone. What's the sense of holding something like that? It says, what he says here is very important, this little bit right here. He says, Bitcoin allows us to give in to our greed. You know? And that's very true. I mean, the thing about Bitcoin is if it keeps progressing upwards in price like this guy says, this is a sure way to win the lottery. I mean, if it does that, you know. I have to laugh about it, but he goes on to talk about a number of other things here to try to make his story seem a little bit more credible. But I think he's talking from the vantage point of 2013. The biggest part of the story that really gets me, though, is his price predictions. It seems a little bit beyond chance to me. You know? And also his knowledge of what would really happen if this scenario actually took place. You know, how the deflationary world would function. If Bitcoin does take over the entire world's financial system, how there would probably really, he's probably right, there'd probably be negative growth anymore because of the deflationary aspect of it. It was like this when we moved through the Middle Ages with gold as a standard behind the world's, backing the world's. This would be basically like a digital form of gold. So I found this to be a very curious article, you know, and I personally, the way I look at it is, I don't pay too much attention to what this guy's got to say, really. But what I pay attention to is the fact that what I've seen from Bitcoin's infancy until now, what I've seen it do, and how I've seen it go through this same cycle over and over again where it climbs up a giant a giant bull market. It goes up and up and up, and it crescendos, and then it falls back down, but not as low as it was before. And then it goes along for a while, and then it starts to warm up again, and then it goes into another giant bull market again. Right now, what we're in is we're in the cycle where it's bottomed out in the bottom of the bull market, pretty much. It could go down a little bit lower, but these would be fluctuations. But basically, it's going to ride along for a while. I can't tell you guys exactly how long. It might be a matter of days. It could be a matter of months. Probably not years. But it's going to ride along like this for a while, bottom bouncing. And then it's going to start to slowly heat back up again. And the next bull market, I think, is going to be that much bigger than the last one. And his prediction of $100,000 in 2019, if it decides, say, to go along for the next 2 or 3 months and continue in this bear market, and if it starts to heat up in the third quarter of 2019, it could very well touch that $100,000 before the end of 2019. But then it would probably fall again. Fall back down to maybe, I don't know, 10,000, 15,000, you know. If a guy knew the exact timing of all this, he could become rich. He could sell at the top and buy in at the bottom and just keep doing that. I mean, you know, if a guy did have a crystal ball and he was able to somehow get the exact timing of all of this. Listen, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next show. Bye-bye, guys.